Hello and welcome back to the HTML5 and CSS video series. Last time we basically added some image in our text and we've got all our information now in here. So now we can actually finally get around to making this look like a decent website and not just something that's been thrown together in half an hour, which technically speaking by this point is the case. So I'm going to go back to my body down here and I'm going to start styling off my header. So up here I've got my H1, which is this reference here, and I want to basically encapsulate this into its own sort of border box at the top. Now the way we're going to do this is we're going to use something called a divider, and what the dividers do is allow us to create sort of Lego boxes almost that contain our content nestled within size. So when we move or adjust that divider, everything within inside it conforms and follows it. This is a good way of making your website have multiple columns, how to move things from one side to the other, and to have everything shift around when you adjust the scale. So I'm going to start off by just before my header at the top. I'm just going to move these in a little bit so we can see this a bit easier. And I'm going to create a new tag. So I'm going to open my tag up. I'm going to type in div class equals, and I'm going to give this a name. So this is where whatever name I give this is what we would reference in our style sheet at the top. So I'm just going to call this a header for fairly obvious reasons, because it's going to be our header box. Close that, and then at the bottom underneath my headers and my subtitle, I'm going to close my div tag up. So I want to make sure that everything that's within this header class is between these two tags here. And now if I was to start controlling this header, we should see things happen. So I'm going to do that now. So because we've used a class for our styling, I'm just going to tighten this up a little bit. I'm going to go back to my head and back into my style area. I'm going to type dot header, which references back to this div class header here. Open these brackets, and now I can start adding in my controls for that header property. So I'm just going to add in some padding, and I'm going to add the padding in at 60 pixels just to give it some sort of edging around it. I'm going to add text align center. So now I could remove my text align from here, and it should apply across. Now, bear in mind these updates won't happen in real time. I will have to possibly give this a kick to have the updates appear. I'm going to give this a background. And I'm just going to use a background color. I could also use an image, but I'm just going to use a color just for the purposes of quick illustration. So as you see now, I've opened up a new window. It's kicked in the changes. Enter. I could add in a color. So this could be the color of my text, for example. So I could have this as aqua. And if I remove this color now from my header, you'd see that my text is now being styled by this header class here. So I can actually start to remove parts of my inline CSS styling now and use the header to control things in that box rather than have it controlled by these sort of overly ugly styling properties that we've done down here. I'm just going to change this back to black for the purposes of visibility. And I could also add a background image, which is what I might do now if I've got one on my machine. We'll soon see. So I'm going to go background image, URL, which is, again, this could be a website or link to a local file on your server. I'm going to open quotation marks, and because I'm using Dreamweaver, I can just use browse. So I'm just going to choose this pattern. Okay. And then close that up. Just tidy this up a little bit. And now if we go to, if we try and kick this in, it should update. Sometimes it can be a little bit pernickety with live updating, I find. So that might kick in at some point. If it doesn't, I'll have a look at it. In fact, I know why it's not, because I haven't closed this quotation off here. There we go. So now I've got my image referenced. It can now have this little floor pattern that shows up. And if this image didn't load, it should default back to the background color that I've set here. Hence why I've got background and background image within this header tag. So now I've done that, and now want to start pushing my About Me information to one side. So I have a sort of 2-column website. So to do that, again, I'm just going to go back down to where my About Me area starts. I'm going to create a new div. So I'm going to go div class equals open quotation marks. I'm just going to type in row. I'm just going to remove this closed div for now because I don't want that actually activating yet. And then I'm also going to add a second div class nestled within that called side. And you'll see why we've done that as we go through this. But basically what I'll do is I want to have a control for the overall row or look of that area. But I also want to have a subcontrol for the side so I can control elements within that div independently if I needed to, instead of controlling everything as a whole within that column that we're going to create. And at the bottom now, I'm just going to close those two tags up, divs up by going /div/div, just to close both of these up. So whenever we have anything open, we also want to make sure we have a close following it, or at the end of an area. So now I have these two classes made. I'm going to go back to my style, and again give myself some more space. This is why you'd have an external CSS file. You wouldn't be necessarily doing it the way I'm doing it, which is internal. But we're doing it internal for the purposes of showing this in the most simple format. Like I said, I'm not a website designer. I have made websites in the past, but I wouldn't call myself an expert. So I'm just going to type in display, flex, and then flex wrap. So now we should have this scaling that happens, or it should adjust to whatever size our width is. I also now want to control the side that I created on the nestled within that. And within this side property, I'm going to add flex 30%, and we'll see why it's 30% in a second, because we're going to have two divs, one that takes up 70% of the page, one that takes up 30%, therefore we have two columns essentially, or two dividers pushing against each other that will scale to our size of our page. I'm going to add a background color, and I'm just going to choose this to be a sort of horrible aquamarine, and then give myself some padding at 20 pixels. So now we've got all this set up, you may notice that nothing's currently happened. The reason for this is we've got this being set to sort of push at 30%, but it's got nothing to push against. It needs another value to equal to 100% for it to be pushed against to give us this side by side. So what I'm going to do is down here, after my side column's been created, I'm going to need to add another divider. And this divider we're going to call div class equals open brackets main. And I'm going to take the end div for this main content area and make sure it is at the very bottom of my site. So all the content within this area here is going to be kept within this one area here, which we'll call our main area. I'm now going to do dot main in my style. Open up my curly brackets, go back to my styling and type flex 70%, background color, just going to keep this as white, padding 20 pixels. There we go. So now we have these two areas here. I just now need to have our website become responsive. So these two areas here aren't currently checking the screen size to actually adjust anything. So for example, if I was to scale this up, they're scaling up, but they're not really still conforming to the left by right that I kind of wanted. So I need to add one more thing into my main, into my styling, and that's an at media, checks our device, screen, checks our screen size, and our max width is 700 pixels. I want this to open brackets, adjust my dot row and dot row, and we'll also add on our nav bar when we create that in a second, and we want that to flex the direction to a column and make sure we've got that closed off. There we go. And just tidy that up. So let's just save this and see how this goes. So as you see, it's still not behaving the way we'd expect it to. So I'm just going to have to reopen this project. So just bear with. So let's just reopen that. And our project has killed itself. So let me just fix this. So I'm just going to remove that media screen thing I've added for a second and resave. See if we can get this to come back to life. File, save as. Seems as if it has saved it, but hasn't saved the correct naming convention. So I'm just going to go to my documents and fix that. Get info. .html. Add. Okay, there we go. So I've fixed that hopefully. So just didn't save the .html for some reason. But now if I reopen it, it should hopefully work. So documents, to the side. There we go. And I'm just going to change my view mode back to the way I want it to be in. There we go. So I'm just going to have to troubleshoot what happened there. As you can see, it's very hard to get everything perfect. Sometimes it's you do have issues. So I just need to work out why we're not getting these two columns working the way we'd expect them to. Let me just check my side, and if I move this div here, just see what's going on. So currently they're not pushing against each other. Now this might fix itself once we start adding our nav bar in. So let's do that, shall we? Whilst also checking that our content is all in there. Div open, div close, div open, div close. Okay, so we've got our header here, and I want to have a navigation bar in between. So to do that, I'm just going to create a new div class. I'm going to call this navbar. Within this div class, we're going to have a variety of h reference equals open quotation marks, and for now I'm just going to have them linked to within my own document. So I'm going to use a hashtag. So what this does is this hashtag here searches within itself, so within the same folder, and it will link to whatever we have as a hashtag after. So if we were to, let's say, have this here called main, or we had a header that had a header ID of, let's give it a header ID equals me, and we used to call this hashtag me, close this open tag, and then add in me as a title. When I click on this, it should take me to this ID that's got the name me assigned to it. So this is how we can reference within ourselves. If we wanted this to go to an external source, we would just type in the URL here like we did down here. So now we've got our navbar in there. I'm just going to close this off. Actually, no, I'm just going to duplicate this and create a few more buttons, so we've got a few more options first, and then close this off. There we go. So we've got a very basic menu there. We now need to style. So to style it, I'm going to go back to my header and go back to my style area. And this is where things get a little bit more complex. So I'm going to do dot navbar open brackets display flex and background color. Free. So now our navbar should apply this color style to it and this flexing approach. And now I want to also style these buttons or these images, these links basically. I'm going to do dot navbar A. So this is looking at for this class navbar and then looking for the A tagged within that. Open brackets, color, white, padding 14 pixels, text, decoration set to none, and text align set to center. And again, always check your spelling because I forgot to put a G there, which is why it wasn't showing up. And now I'm also going to adjust the state of what it looks like when it's hovered over. So I'm going to do navbar A colon hover open square brackets background color. I'm just going to call this green again. I'm not worrying about what it looks like at the moment. I'm just can always fix that later. Color black. So now if I hover over these buttons in live view, this should give us some styling. So if I go to live, there we go. So as I go over the buttons, I now have a green outline on them and the text will change color, and these still work as links. Now I can't preview this within Dreamweaver itself. I've got to publish this online afterwards and see if these work, which we will do at the end. First of all, I need to address why this isn't being pushed the way it should be. So I'm just going to spend a bit of time troubleshooting what happened there and let you know what I did to resolve it. So I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so I've gone through my script, made sure I've done a spell checking on it. So I've noticed I spelled initial up here incorrectly, so I've fixed that spelling. I also worked out why this wasn't being pushed correctly. It's because I'd missed something out. So up here, you notice I've added this in, that wasn't in the video. Basically this here is our overall controller. So this is going to adjust our width of our sizes of our boxes. So we need this in here to control our dividers correctly, to take into fact our device's width and adjust our boxes accordingly when we're using our flex values down here. So that was that bit fixed. The other reason it's not working is I've got actually down here in my div class rows, I've got two divs. I should only really have one for the purposes of this. So if I do remove the second div here and my page refreshes, you should now see that our website looks a bit more in line with what was intended. So we should now have our side panel here and our main content here with our working menus at the top. So as you see, it's very easy to get overwhelmed with HTML5 and CSS, and it can sometimes catch you out. So you always double check your grammar and your spelling, because any slight mistyping can cause big problems down the line, as you just saw. It's an excellent example of how it's easy it is to make a mistake. So one more thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a footer to a website. So to do that, I'm just going to again create another div class equals footer. And in this div class, I'm going to use the H6 header style. And I'm just going to type in website designed by Catalyst, not a professional. So if we look at the bottom of the page, we should have nothing shown up at the moment because we've got no way of telling this header to appear. Well, sorry, this footer to appear, because it's contained within a box that currently is being overwritten by these two boxes here and hidden. So in order for this div to appear, we need to go back up to its style. We need to do dot footer. And we need to add some padding of 20 pixels or whatever you feel is appropriate. Text, align, center, background, red for now, just to highlight what's going on. So if I scroll down now, you should see that we've got it there, and we might need to give it a bit of a kick to show us the changes. There we go. But at the moment it's still not actually conforming to our website's dimensions. Now this would technically work on some devices but wouldn't conform or be responsive as we want it to be. So to fix that, we need to add one more thing into our style, which is our @media screen and max width 700 pixel checker essentially. Now we did add this in earlier and then we removed it because we thought this may have been the issue, but actually we was a little bit ahead of ourselves. So I'm just going to add this back in, so making sure that we've got this within our style, and we should have our row and our nav bar as the checks with the flex direction set as a column. So when this is less than 700 pixels, it will be on top of each other. Once it is more than 700 pixels, they should be side by side. And we just need to now check our footer to make sure that that is being displayed correctly. So let's just check our div classes down here. I think we need one more /div down here for it to end that content. And again, we'll give it a kick to see if that is correct. There we go. So I had a div open somewhere higher up that hadn't been closed off, so I added double div at the end of my main, because I believe this div is for this here, and this closed div is for our row up here, which is why we was having that issue earlier. Because we're actually not closing this one until the very, very end, and we're closing this one here, if that makes sense. So once these two divs are divided, we have a third one, which is our third box, which will span the entire bottom of our site. So as you see, this is the most, still looks a little bit crude, but it looks a little bit better than what we started off with. And this has just been a very short kind of, I say short, this has been a very kind of brief overview of HTML5 and CSS, designed for those who may have never used it before. There's a lot more we can do with it. There's animations you can apply with HTML and CSS script. That's very easy to do. We may come back to that in the future. But for now, this is just a kind of very basic video, mainly to try and help some students I get who get stuck with HTML5 or have never touched it before in their life. The entire project file for this will be available down in the description down below for people to play about with and explore and elaborate on. So I've been Stephen Fisher, this has been the Catalyst channel. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.